Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Soul Rising podcast. I am Amanda McCoy Flanagan. I am your host. Welcome back. I'm so glad that you're here. If this is your first time here, we are all in on love, loss, and connection. We talk about all things human motion and how it relates to how it serves to connect us to ourselves, to other people, and to something greater. And I am really happy today to have my friend, Dr. Heather Taylor, who I'm going to read a little bit about her bio, but we met in the Get Griefy small business collective. So Kara Sanchez is this awesome lady. Go follow Get Griefy magazine if you don't know who she is, who is just on a mission to normalize grief, to talk about grief, to not make it so heavy all the time, but just to talk about it. That's just another part of life, which it is, you know? So all of us ladies have recently been coming together and meeting each other. This is so great. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here and to have this conversation.
Yeah, this is going to be great. Okay, so Dr. Heather Taylor is a licensed psychologist based in Washington State, specializing in grief, trauma, and reproductive psychology. She is the host of the Grief is the New Normal podcast, where she explores the multifaceted nature of grief and offers insights and support to those navigating their own grief journeys. Dr. Taylor is also the founder of the Professional Grief Collective, a pioneering initiative designed to provide clinicians, therapists, and grief coaches with resources, consultation, and community to enhance their grief support practices. Her work is dedicated to normalizing grief and providing a platform for open discussions about loss and healing. So welcome to the show, Heather.
Thanks, Amanda.
So why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? What got you into this work? Maybe a little bit about your story, and then we'll just go on from there.
Sounds good. So hi, I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, but you can just call me Heather. That's what most of my clients do. I got into this work because of my own experience with loss. I lost my younger brother really suddenly. He had an accidental drug overdose in 2009. He was 22. And it really created this big pivot in my life. I had thought I was going to be a librarian. I had my bachelor's in business. Like I was not in the psychology griefy space at all. And when I tried to find a grief therapist, because I didn't even know there were grief coaches back then, because again, I think we just didn't do grief well, especially, 15, 16 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I tried to find a therapist. They put VHS tapes on, literally VHS tapes on in a session instead of asking me about my brother and talking about grief. It was like, we've got to do this better. So that's kind of what I said. And I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on here, but I said, fuck it. I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to become a therapist because we have to do this better. This is terrible. So that's what I did. I got into a doctoral program. And again, because I had my background in business, I was like, I'm going to do the longer track because I want to feel more equipped and prepared. And then, of course, when I get in the program, there is no specialized grief therapy modality. Mm-hmm. They barely talk about grief. And so because I understood the lived experience of traumatic loss personally, I wanted to understand the slow goodbye. So I started volunteering with hospice probably second semester of my first year of the program. And I went through their 40-hour bereavement training, volunteer training program, which was amazing. And then became a bereavement volunteer. And I even did the extra training and became a vigil volunteer. So I would go to class from 6 to 10 at night and then go home, have a little snack. And then I would go sit vigil from midnight to 4 a.m. And I did that for about 4 years because I really wanted to understand that slow goodbye. I wanted to know how to sit with people who are in that leaving the world space, and to know how to support their loved ones as they navigated that. And then that's what I did my dissertation on, was looking at Facebook and mourning practices because that was still a new thing, like grieving on digital spaces. And grief is my jam. That's always been what I've been passionate about. And so that's kind of that's the bigger story.
I'd say that too. Grief is my jam. And it's like, what? It's like, I love death. I love everything about it. It's fascinating to me. I'm reading a book about near-death experience right now. I mean, I've read many of them, but my dad is into it too. And he sent me one recently. And I just feel the most engaged, almost enthralled when I'm in this space or when I'm reading literature about it or whatever, watching a movie, whatever it is. So to me, I know that there has to be something more. That's kind of a different conversation. But the reason why I was thinking about that is because this hospice work that you did, and I love the phrase sit vigil, like it's really just like a holding space, right?
Yeah.
Like when and it's not easy to do. Can you tell us a little bit more what that experience is like?
Oh, sure.
And also how you because I'm interested in becoming a death doula someday and going in that direction. But I'll tell you the truth, I'm a little worried about being consumed by other people's pain. And so how do you set boundaries with that? Like, how do you then leave that space to be happy Heather?
Right. Because I am kind of a bubbly personality.
Yeah.
I like colors. I have big energy. And yet I do this really sacred grief work. It's a very different headspace and pace from my normal day-to-day sense of self, I guess. So for me, when I was sitting vigil, it allowed me to slow down. One of the trainers, Sandy Powers, she's on LinkedIn. She does coaching and everything. She was my trainer. She's an amazing human. And I remember this story she shared during the bereavement volunteer training about being late to provide bereavement leave. So sitting with the loved one while the family needed a break to go run errands, because as we know, caregiving is really exhausting and lots of burnout. And that's one of the gifts we can give as bereavement for bereavement care. And she said she was running late and rushing to get there. And the son of the woman she was going to go sit with came out before she could run in and bring her chaotic energy in, came out and was like, I can tell you're running late. We're going to take some deep breaths. Why don't you join me in the kitchen before you go sit with my mom? And we're going to have some tea and just let's calm down to make sure we're in a good energy space so you can really be present with my mom. And that story,
Wow.
I mean, I heard that story 12 years ago, 13 years ago, and that's just really stuck with me that, okay, when I'm entering that sacred vigil space, how do I make sure I'm in a good energy space so I can sit and hold space for someone else who is in that thinning space, you know? So when I would finish class, I'd go have my snack. I'd have my little rituals that I would do to kind of ground myself in preparation of sitting in those spaces. So I would make a certain kind of tea. I would listen to a certain playlist. This was back in 2011, 12, 13-ish. And I didn't really have books on my phone. We didn't really, that wasn't really a big thing back then. So I would have certain books that I would read, and I would read out loud while I was sitting vigil. So if I could get some insights into the person I was going to be sitting with, I would bring a book to read out loud to them that was maybe a favorite of theirs. Or sometimes I would feel called to sing, especially if they were religious. And I grew up with a religious background, so I was familiar with some songs. So just quietly humming or singing, again, trying to be in tune with the person that I'm sitting with. And, and I had the honor of being with 3 individuals while they passed. So in those final moments, those final breaths, wanting to really be present and engaged and in tune with who I was sitting with, and knowing that if I can do something that's going to help their transition be more peaceful or honoring to their spirit, I wanted to be able to do that. So I would really slow myself down, do those rituals to take care of myself. And then after, I would find ways to metabolize that energy out. So there's a really great book called Trauma Stewardship, and a lot of it talks about how as healers, we find ways to metabolize out what we carry while we do this really hard heart work for others. And that I remember reading that early in my program. And a lot of those strategies I still do today, whether that's doing my own process art or movement that feels nourishing. Did I answer your question? Sorry, I got a little rambly.
Oh, no. Definitely. It's the greatest gift that we can give somebody is presence.
Yep.
Right? Just being with somebody and not trying to change how they feel, or just in that space specifically, just making it, like you're saying, a little bit more peaceful.
Yeah.
What a gift. What a gift to them and to you. And the fact that you have that in you, that innate desire to do that, and the ability, the capacity really, right? The capacity that you have that space inside for you to then be offering that to somebody else. So then when you leave that space, so then that's the nourishing and you kind of reground and you do all of that and then release whatever so that you can then go into a new space with somebody else, not carrying all of that. You know, I think to people who aren't naturally drawn to this work, that might sound exhausting, like a lot of work. But, you know, I have found that if the work that I'm doing is really coming from, I believe it comes from spirit. Like I just get moved in ways to do things. And if it's less me and my like humanness and I allow spirit to move me in ways, they're doing the work. I'm just kind of the hands and feet, right? So I don't have to put in all of that effort because it's not about me, number one, and I'm not attached to the outcome. I'm just the messenger, right? I don't have to like maybe there's no like, I'm not placing like a value or a worth on like necessarily what they're getting out of it. Like that'd be great if you get something out of whatever work I'm doing with you, but it's really just in the being and the doing of the work or even just being present with it that's enough.
Yeah.
That's enough. Like we don't have to put pressure on us to like produce something in these spaces. And that's what's so beautiful about this space because people don't want that. They just want
I'm not there to fix.
Yeah.
I'm not there to heal. I'm not there to rescue. I'm there to be and bear witness. And, you know, I love the word capacity. That is such if I could pick like top 3 most meaningful words for my life, I feel like capacity would actually be one of them.
Oh, really?
Oh, absolutely. When I was a new clinician, we had to come up with metaphors for things, right? And one of my favorite metaphors is like learning how to hold space. And so, you know, when we're first doing this work, whether it's sitting vigil, whether it's sitting in therapy session, it's almost like we're a little Dixie cup, those little paper ones that you'd have in your grandma's bathroom, you know, that she would use. So it's like you're a tiny Dixie cup. And then over time, it's like the more work that you do on yourself and in these spaces, it's like you get cup upgrades. So maybe after a year of this work, you're like a tall Starbucks cup, like your paper, you've got a lid, like it's still, you can make a mess and pour over, but like you can hold more. And then maybe after you've been doing this work for maybe 10 years, you're like one of those, you know, 20-gallon water jugs that has the hot and the cold release valve. So you know what kind of release you need. And you can hold so much more than maybe when you first started. And I share that a lot with my students because we're so worried that we're going to be messy. And it's like, we're supposed to be messy. We're humans. We're not supposed to perfectly hold things as we're growing these capacity muscles. So I think that's such a important word.
I love that. And it just like happens.
Yeah.
You don't even have to like try too hard. You just have the experiences and it just occurs.
Right. Well, and learning how to take care of yourself as you're growing through those cup upgrades, so to speak.
So, okay. So you do a lot in spaces with other people, clinicians, therapists, grief coaches, and then providing consultation and community. So let's talk a little bit about that. The benefit or the necessity really for community, especially in this work, and maybe your experience with grief after your brother passed. I find it fascinating how some people just kind of go away and then some other people come in. Like I have a best friend now who was really just an acquaintance before my brother died. And she came in because her mother died about a year before. So she understood the grief. So how do you work in community with people?
Yeah. Big question, I think, because there's so many different aspects, right? In my own personal grief journey, I had joined a young adult community group maybe 6 weeks before my brother died, met some cool gals, similar life stages, things like that. And so then he passes and one of the gals connects with me because a mother figure for her had died 3 days before Garrett. She became my grief bestie and is still one of my closest friends to this day, even though we'd only known each other maybe 6 weeks, like had a good vibe, but like I didn't know her long, but we did grief together. And having that touchstone person who went through dark December with me because my brother died in November. And so we both had these like dark Decembers, and that was just kind of our thing. But like she was in it with me, and I didn't have to apologize for how my grief was showing up, and she didn't have to apologize for how her grief was showing up. Like we could just be together without, again, not trying to fix or rescue or minimize, because we were both in pain and knew that talking about our person wasn't going to make us more sad. So there was like this permission to talk about it. And then I think on like a bigger scale, learning how to invite people into that grief space with us is so important. We can feel so isolated in our grief. And so finding ways to invite people into that grief space can help reduce the isolation and reduce that responsibility to be the ones remembering our person. Because then other people are remembering them too. So I think that also helps reducing that isolation piece. So like within our family, I always think of the first anniversary of Gare dying. And it was just me and my folks on our own, doing our own thing. And it sucked. It was awful. I mean, yes, the day was going to suck anyways, but just kind of being isolated, the three of us, was just not great. It didn't feel comforting. And we talked with some extended family afterwards, and they were like, oh my gosh, we would have loved to be in that space with you on that day. And so then the next year we did a pizza party, and we all went to this local place that did really good gluten-free pizza. And that just became our thing, is we got together as a family every year on the anniversary of his passing. And we still do it. It's a week before Thanksgiving. So we just have maintained that tradition of inviting people into our families into that grief space with us. And it's made the anniversary feel so much less isolating and painful, is having that community and connection and remembering.
That's awesome. I love that, because sometimes when we think about community, it's like, sometimes I think about just other people my age or friends or acquaintances. Sometimes I don't think of family so much in that community mindset, I guess because of the nature of my own family not being extremely close, or, when my grandmother died, we've kind of all scattered a little bit, and then my mother's two sisters passed away. So there's not many of us left, really, to tell the truth. So if you have a close family, I could see that automatically being a given, right? The family's going to be together. But if you don't, and then you can use the grief as a way to bring that family back together. It bonds you, because you guys know that person the best, right? And like you're the closest to them, so you feel comfortable talking about them with your family. So I think grief, I always say grief is a gift, and people in acute grief would hate to hear that, right? But it's really, when you look back, when you get a little time, a little space between, you realize that there are gifts that can come from it. And that community, maybe that you never really had before, friends that like you never really felt comfortable with, but now you do because you shared that dark December, or you shared that whatever. It can grow. Again, back to that word capacity. And I love the cup. I didn't say that. I love that cup, the jug, and that's so good. That's so good. Thank you. You're dropping so many great analogies, metaphors, whatever.
I love me a metaphor. I'm here for the metaphors.
That's awesome. Yep. I love them.
But I mean, I think you mentioned an important thing too. Like, I have kind of a rare family situation where the grief brought us back together. Whereas so often grief can be really divisive and amplify that isolation. And so that's something I love about the digital spaces, the online communities, and how we're able to find connection with people who've maybe experienced a similar type loss, where we can feel seen and validated and, create ways to have legacy work and meaning making for our person. Because we don't maybe have that family community. We've made our own community in our grief. I mean, I think about even just the Get Griefy collective, like a lot of us feel so seen and safe in that space because we all speak that same grief language. Because I think that's what happens when we go through a loss, is we learn a new language.
Yes. And you have to create it. You have to like intentionally create it. And I know in the very early days, you could barely get out of bed, right? Like barely survive. But once you get your footing a little bit and you're able to breathe and go out of the house, whatever, right? And try to live again, it has to be intentional. It really has to be like this intentional cultivating of a space, a group, whether it's online, digitally, and seeking out those people, or it's sitting down thinking about, who do I want in my grief space? Who do I want to share this with? and then reaching out to those people intentionally, letting them know that you want to talk about it too, right? Because a lot of people they just don't know. And they might assume, again, like you had said something before, like talking about them doesn't make me sad. People think that if you bring up the person's name, it's like, well, if we don't talk about it, it's just not there. It's like not a thing, right? Like no, that's not true. So letting people know, yes, I'm interested and I want to talk and I want you, I'm choosing you as a person. Will you do this with me? Right.
Yeah.
And usually it is somebody that that has also lost somebody, because it's just a different animal. It's like if I play soccer, I might find somebody who also plays soccer because we can talk soccer. It's like the same thing. If I know grief and I've been there, I've seen the darkness, I've been there, then I can, I might call somebody in or invite somebody into my space that also understands. That's just right. Going to somebody who has no experience at all with it, you're probably setting yourself up for a little bit of disappointment because they're just not going to get it the same way.
Yeah, for sure.
So I love this trauma stewardship. I wrote that down. I mean, that is huge. Who wrote that book? I'm going to find that.
Oh, shoot. Vanderlipsky.
Vanderlipsky. I'm going to get that.
I think it's on my shelf and my contact subscription is not strong enough to read it from my bookshelf.
You're good. Oh, yeah. So if anybody out there listening, doing this work as well with others, it's probably really, really helpful to learn how to hold that space, to be in that space, because it's skill.
Yeah.
It's not something that comes completely natural. Right.
Well, and our bodies carry so much. So if we're not able to find ways to metabolize that out, I firmly believe that can lead to other health complications because our bodies are holding all of that. So we're going to maybe feel more exhausted and run down or have potential for health stuff if we're not able to metabolize the weight of what we're carrying out of us.
Yes. My mother was diagnosed with breast cancer 4 years after my grandmother died. And then she was diagnosed with lymphoma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, 3 years after my brother died. So we know, right? We don't need to be scientists, not sitting here scientists. We know that if you're not metabolizing, which is a great word, metabolizing that out of you, digesting it, letting it go through the whole system and detoxing it, or, then it's going to come back physically. And I know that you've had some chronic health challenges with chronic illness. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that? And we talked before the show, we can talk about how that also is a form of grief that I don't think a lot of people think about.
Absolutely. I'm trying to think of how I want to start. So it's a complicated story. So I was pregnant in 2020 with my daughter. And, that was a stressful experience in and of itself, being pregnant during the pandemic.
Sure.
She was born in October, and at about 10 weeks postpartum, I thought I was having a really bad anxiety attack. Again, I'm a mental health provider, so if my body's speaking to me in one way, that's the lens I'm going to read it through. So I thought I was having a panic attack, except it was lasting for like 2 days. And technically, a panic attack lasts 6 to 8 minutes. So I'm like, okay, I think something's wrong. I went to the emergency room and they gave me morphine and sent me home. Yeah,
that's what they're good at.
And sent a referral for internal medicine. I was like, okay.
Morphine, that's intense. Wow.
I know. Because I was in pain.
Yeah.
And so thankfully my partner reached out, made the appointment because I had no energy. I was not well. And we go in and apparently I had an abnormal EKG. And she's like, you should schedule an echo because you might have postpartum cardiomyopathy, which for those of our listeners who don't know what that means I was in heart failure as a result of being pregnant.
Oh my goodness.
Which didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
Didn't know that was a thing. Yeah. So I call and I make the appointment for the echo. And thankfully, they had a cancellation for 2 days later. I was able to get in. And the poor tech was like, so you're not going to leave. You're not going to leave before the doctor comes in and talks to you. I was like, oh, sure. I didn't know a doctor needed to come in and talk to me. And they were like, okay, so your ejection fraction, which is how efficiently your heart is pumping blood throughout your body, is at 10%. And a normal healthy heart is 60 to 65%. So you need to go down to the emergency room and check yourself in because you don't have 2 weeks to wait to get in with a cardiologist. So that's what I did. I was in the hospital for 5 days. That's kind of the beginning of my journey to adjusting my capacity, living in chronic heart failure. So I'm stable. This was 4 years ago, but I'm still in heart failure. My numbers actually just went down again. I'm at 38% ejection fraction. So we're doing some more tests and trying to figure out how to reduce stress and adjust my capacity again. Because I'm used to operating up here, which I'm, for those listening and not watching, I'm pointing above my head.
Yeah.
And now I'm like at a reduced capacity. And so there's a lot of grief there in figuring out what I can say yes to and no to. And like being excited about aspects of my career and yet having to dial it back in other ways if I'm wanting to pursue certain things, and finding that balance. And I still have 2 small kids at home. And so how do I take care of myself while living in heart failure and grieving what that means, and the fears and all the ripples that can come from that?
Yeah. And like the limitations, right? That you deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you have to get really honest with yourself and say, it sucks, but I just can't do that.
Yeah.
You know, people have different capacities for stress and what they can take on when honoring your body and listening to your body. I never heard of cardiomyopathy except Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, the broken heart syndrome. Do you know about that?
Oh, no.
I learned that from Nina. I talk about Nina all the time. Nina Rodriguez, Brief and Light. She taught me about Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, which is the actual broken heart syndrome, where you, like, somebody dies and then 6 months or a year later, the spouse or the child, the parent, whatever, somebody else passes away. And I always thought it was just like a spiritual thing, which I still do believe that there's part of that, soul families, traveling and all that kind of stuff. But also this disease where this chronic stress of the grief and your heart, your blood pressure, your heart is just pumping, trying to keep up because of this chronic high blood pressure.
Yeah.
That comes from grief. We don't realize how grief manifests in so many physical ways. Just being tired all the time. And the stress of just doing the littlest thing feels like such a big thing, right? It's just
Absolutely
just stressed out so much more. And so your heart is trying to keep up, and the left ventricle, actually the pathway in narrows and then kind of blows up into what is called a Takotsubo, which is an octopus trap. That's a type of octopus trap called Takotsubo. So that's why it's Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. So I never even heard the word cardiomyopathy until then. And then you just said it again. So yes, so it's this heart failure. So
as a result of being pregnant.
And
it happens to like 1 in 4,000 women. But again, because it has to do with women, they don't really study it. So it's,
This is true. I mean, I don't think a lot of women out there know that heart disease is the #1 cause of death. Not breast cancer. It's not addictions, or, like we think about these big things that we hear about, suicide, like we think about these big things all the time. It's heart disease. So what do you do to take care of yourself with that, aside from like having to maybe limit some things? And
I'm on a lot of medications. So some pretty hard-hitting heart failure meds, and watch my sodium intake, and I try to reduce stress.
Stress, all about stress.
It's so much stress, and prioritizing sleep.
Okay.
And I have 2 small humans, so prioritizing sleep has been
challenging.
I'm not great at it. I'll be honest.
I'm sure. No, sleep is, I think people also underestimate the benefit of sleep. I mean, I know for me, that's the #1 thing that messes me up the most, is when I don't sleep. Everything's off. My whole system is jacked up the next day. I'm like extra hungry. I have anxiety. Not sleeping gives me anxiety. So that's a lot that you're carrying.
Sleep scarcity fears.
So what else do you want to share with our listeners while we're here? I know you have to go soon. So I usually ask if you have one like tidbit or tool or tip for people who are maybe navigating grief, who want to reach out, step into community, but maybe you're afraid to or don't know how to do that. What would you tell a client?
I mean, I think I'm going to stick with the health diagnosis stuff because that feels top of mind. So when navigating either a new health diagnosis for yourself or for someone in your family system, I guess my biggest encouragement is to approach it from a place of curiosity rather than moving into that catastrophizing or fear-based decision making, and be creative with what feels good for you, because you're trying to hone that new awareness, that new skill of understanding your capacity and what what feels good and right and true for you. And there's going to be some fear, some worries, and that gets to be okay. You don't have to say, oh, it's all going to be fine. You don't have to minimize how much it impacts you, especially because a lot of these diagnoses are unseen. Like, you can't, I mean, we don't have these flashing signs at the top of our head that like, this person's in heart failure, this person has diabetes. Like, we don't have that. So, having grace for yourself that not everyone's going to understand or have their own capacity to compromise or work with you based on your limitations. So being brave in naming what you need and that need can change. So you don't have to have it all figured out once you get that diagnosis and know like all the next steps. So I think that would probably be my biggest encouragement is having curiosity and grace for yourself as you navigate all of the feelings that can come up with these new diagnoses and the ripples that has on your day-to-day lives and your family systems.
Yeah, and you said something that sparked a thought, like not to take yourself too seriously. Like, yes, you might be you might be facing a serious diagnosis that is going to come with the fears and all of that.
Yeah.
But like, know that it's going to change. The way you feel today is not necessarily how you're going to feel tomorrow. And your situation, your actual health might change in a week, a month, a year, and 5 years. So how you're feeling right now, try not to get too like committed or dedicated to that feeling, right? Don't get like stuck in that. Know that it's going to pass, right?
Yeah.
Everything kind of passes and changes. So great advice. Stay where you are, stay present, stay curious about, okay, well, what does that mean? And not to get too sucked into like one thing and then harden that belief, right? Like kind of stay a little bit more fluid in that, where it's like, okay, I'm open to maybe tomorrow I will be thinking about, or my mindset, or, I'll learn something new and then I'll be able to take this drug or eat this food or do this workout, whatever it is that's going to bring you to the next level of healing. So,
yeah. Well, and also like, there's going to be grief ripples from this, and it's okay to ride those grief waves as they come up where, okay, maybe I could have committed, like I used to volunteer a lot for an outdoor camp for like 18 years. And when I got my diagnosis, I had to really step back how much I could give because so much of it was a lot of like physical presence and things like that. And so there's been a lot of grief there around how that's impacted my identity and the relationships that I had. And that was an unexpected grief ripple from that initial diagnosis. And it's similar with a death event, just like a non-death event. There's going to be ripples from that and loss that comes from that. And it's okay to name that and know that there can be pivots and different things that come.
Yeah, and it's not forever.
No.
It might not be forever. And if you take one thing out, you might then be able to fill that time with something else. Maybe that's less stressful, less physically straining, like maybe I want to read more. Maybe I want to listen to a podcast more. Maybe I want to sit out in the sunshine or take a leisurely walk, things that maybe you never did before, that now by removing one thing, now you've made space to fill it with something else.
Yeah.
Right? Just kind of replace that.
Yeah.
But that's great. Thank you so much for that. So where can people find you? Where should they go to follow you?
Yeah.
Oh, a book. You just wrote a journal. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I'm on the Instagrams at Grief is the New Normal. I have a grief journal called Authentically Unapologetic, and it's a lot of my hot takes on grief in a journal format. There's grief check-ins, there's a lot of exercises. I think it's beneficial for both the everyday griever as well as clinicians who want to use some of the handouts in their practices. I've got the podcast. It's available on all major podcasty platforms. I have a YouTube channel, all under the same Grief is the New Normal umbrella. And then literally this month, we're in March, I just launched my professional grief collective. So that's for clinicians and coaches who are wanting deeper understanding and training in grief work. So there's handouts, there's monthly grief didactic calls, there's one-on-one conversations with me. I'm hoping to grow it more to be a bigger training, educating, griefy platform.
I love that. Can you actually send me some information on that? That's something that I'm definitely interested in.
Yeah.
In investigating, because
yes.
the grief coach I need to learn. And I've been looking for mentors. I've been looking for people to help, just increase my skills or, my own personal, how I can take care of myself better, all of that stuff, which I'm sure you address. So
yeah, I'm really excited. It's been a few months work in process. So I'm excited to finally launch that this month.
So that's awesome. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Very cool, Heather. Well, thank you so much for being with us. I really appreciate your time and your beautiful energy. You're just you are a bubbly, happy Heather. That's your new nickname. just made that up. All right. Well, I will talk with you soon. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This was an honor to get to be on your show today.
You are so welcome. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.